Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to this very special episode of Circle of Fellows. As usual, I'm joined by IABC Fellows, International Association of Business Communicators. But this is a bit different. We don't have a single specific theme to address. Instead, we are going to be engaged in conversation with our three newest fellows. Three people I am looking forward to having dinner with 1 week from tomorrow in New York City at the IABC World Conference. So I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves briefly because after that, we're going to go around and get more information about your careers, what you're doing now, and some other topics of conversation that we're going to engage in. But we'll go clockwise as I see you on my screen. And Zora, that makes you first.
Oh, lucky me. I'm morning from Melbourne in Australia. So you see me with my, morning face on. I'm coming to you from all the way in Australia, as I said. Can't wait to be in New York in just a week or less than a week, really. And I've been working in the communication industry for close to 30 or just over 30 years. So quite a long time. Started in tourism, went into marketing, branding, advertising, and expanded into management consulting and comms. So I'm really happy to be here.
Excellent. Robin, you would be next.
Thank you. So I'm Robin McCasland. I'm from Dallas, Texas in the United States. And I've been in the profession roughly 35 years. And before that, I actually worked in real estate, in property management and sales before I decided to use my degree and go back into communications. Currently, I'm Senior Director of Corporate Communications for Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Illinois, Montana, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Texas. Those are the 5 Blues plans that we oversee.
There's a brand name that must be difficult to imprint on people's minds.
Well, our parent company is Healthcare Service Corporation for those 5 plans, but they're like, what's that? So we always use the Blues plans for the United States. Everybody knows Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Absolutely. Just remembering all of those states.
Yeah.
Sue.
Hi, everybody. Sue Heuman. I am the co-owner of Focus Communications here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I have been doing this for 41 years. So I think I beat y'all just a little bit. We all started when we were 5, Shel, right? We remember seeing you in the sandbox when we were all 5. So that all makes sense. And I come into this straight from, my post-secondary in advertising and public relations, and I've been doing it ever since. It's been a fun ride.
Well, I've been at it for 45 years, so and I was a newspaper reporter before that. I did not add up all the experience that we have here, but it's a lot. So we'll tap into that in our discussion. But what I'd like to start with is how you feel about becoming a fellow. The process is a lengthy one. I know that I nominated one of you for this honor, and putting the nomination together is a process. Then the committee that meets, the panel that makes the selection, spends a lot of time on it. This is not a quick, pick or sending out a ballot. There is considerable discussion, often requests for additional information from the candidates. There have been years where no fellows have been selected because the panel didn't think that there was anybody worthy or that the nominations weren't complete enough. So having been through this myself, I know how I felt when I was selected. I'm curious what this means to you. Sue, can we start with you?
I laugh because somebody said to me, is it like the Groucho Marx quote, I wouldn't want to be part of an organization that would have me for a member. Because it just feels so overwhelming. There are so many incredible fellows that I have, in fact, looked up to my career, who I have followed, who have been generous with their time and advice to me. So to be part of this group just doesn't seem real for some reason. It's a bit overwhelming, to be honest.
Robin, how about you?
Yeah, I will say that I remember going to my first international conference 29 years ago. And I remember then meeting some of the amazing people who were involved in Iebc and a few fellows. And at the time I thought, who are these amazing people? I could never possibly, like, I looked up to them and, what is that like? Right. And so to fast forward to today and go, what? Like to be part of that group is really, really special. And I have to say that, I was one of the first non-fellows when some changes were made a few years ago. I was one of the first non-fellows to serve on the fellow selection committee. And it is a really hard job. And I admire everybody who, the fellows and the non-fellows who are willing to serve on that committee, because they're very thorough and they want to do right by everybody. And they follow a really exacting rubric, if you will, for selecting people. And I really admire that. So yeah, it's a really special feeling to be part of the fellows group now.
Right. And Zora?
Well, for me, it's an incredible honor. I never really expected to be part of this group. I know how difficult it is to be selected. I know what the process of nomination is like, having nominated someone who is now a fellow the other year. It is long and it takes a lot of effort, so thank you. And from my perspective, I'm just incredibly honoured. It does mean a lot. I've been a member with Iabc since 2011 and really focused on the comms profession since just before that, but really since then. So my background is so varied, and to be recognised in this way is it's just incredible for me, and to be amongst a group of people who are just so knowledgeable, generous, and always willing to give. It's just an incredible honour, so I'm very grateful. Thank you.
We, on this broadcast, always have a collection of fellows talking about a dimension of communication. We don't often talk about the fellows program itself, but in a lot of associations, there are lots of fellows. There are organizations where you look down the roster and half of the membership are fellows. This is not the way we treat it in Iebc. Some have called this a Lifetime Achievement Award. I resist that because my lifetime isn't over yet, and I suspect yours isn't either. But there are some pretty significant criteria to meet, and one of those is contributions to the profession. Obviously, contributions to Iebc and the community are among the other criteria, but you have to have made a contribution to the profession at large. And I'd like to go there now for a few minutes. And Zora, I'd like to start with you, because you did some phenomenal work around alignment that I think is going to serve the profession well for a long time. Can you provide some background about that, where that came from, how you went about it, and what you learned?
Yeah, sure. In 2018, I did a piece of work with a colleague called Wayne Aspland, and Wayne and I served on the Iabc Victoria board a number of years ago together, and we got to know each other quite well, and both of us were consulting for a period of time. And at the time that we had the idea to do this piece of research, I was CEO of a mid-size agency, about 25 or so people. And one of the things that stuck in my mind, as well as from his experience, was you do all this work with clients. You do very good work from a strategic perspective, campaigns, a whole range of different things. And then you see something that just doesn't gel. You know, you see how clients look at it almost sometimes as a shopping list, and it doesn't get executed as well as it could be, particularly if they're the ones responsible for doing it. So we thought there's something in this, we need to have a look at it. And we thought that it could have been misalignment, you know, so our strategy is only as good as the execution as well. So the two need to work hand in hand. So we wanted to see, was there an alignment issue? So we, you know, developed our hypothesis that we thought there could potentially be an issue around alignment and alignment at leadership, and what impact or what role did communication professionals play in that. So we undertook this global research study, and a lot of you did participate in it, and we had the Iabc Foundation endorse the research, and it was the first one that they had done in its new guise. And we researched, and we had about 270 odd senior people from around the world respond to this. So everyone from, you know, smaller organisations and consultants through to the world's largest corporate, and you can guess which one that would be. And the results were fascinating. So we knew that everyone understood what strategic alignment meant. Everyone knew that it was critical to achieving the outcomes that they need in an organisation, to a high-performing and a well organisation. They understood that. But what was the problem was that only 13% of the organisations were genuinely well aligned. So 13% out of the whole group, which is really concerning. And the problem came down to the fact that it rested with CEOs as well as the senior comms professionals. They either didn't know where to start with alignment, or they just didn't know how to go about it. So that sort of opened up this massive pathway for us to look at alignment in much more detail. I basically really immersed myself in it, and it's my main focus of the work that I do now. And it's just incredible. And it just shows all the gaps that are around. And it also shows the difference between, you know, thinking tactically and thinking strategically, and understanding how to really sell your value, and understanding that the comms is the enabler. It's the thread through an organisation that helps an organisation be aligned. Without that, you can't do it. And without the buy-in and the commitment from the CEO and the executive, you just won't be able to do it. So it doesn't matter how many initiatives you do, if you don't have the CEO support and you don't have those relationships, it's not going to work.
I'd certainly like to open the floor to any comments, Sue, and Robin, that you might have on this topic.
Yeah, my experience. Why don't you go ahead, Sue? I saw you open your mouth.
This is the challenge when you have communication people together. It's not a lack of talking. You know, I think that Zora's really described a critical issue in a lot of organizations, and where you think there's alignment, sometimes it's a matter of either lip service, or people who genuinely don't understand what they're meant to be aligned to, or they you know, haven't quite bought into it, and so they're not really helping the organization move forward. And so I think it's a really critical issue, and I think the work that Zora's done in this area is really remarkable. So congratulations on that, Zora. I think it's something that all organizations need to pay attention to, for sure.
It's always surprising to me. I think because maybe some of us have been lucky because we've been involved in Iebc for so long, and other organizations where we've learned from the best, and we take a strategic approach to everything. But I'm always surprised, either when I go into a new organization or during the years that I was a communication consultant, how many are not aligned and how many aren't there. And sometimes I forget that, and I think, oh, right, maybe I've been in a bubble because of the people that I associate with in our association. And I could not agree more that it's lacking in so many ways. And even in where I am now, which is an awesome company, and I feel really grateful to be there. But until we had a new leader, my boss, and a change in leadership and some other things, we were able to get things to a much better place where those of us who have the background were like, what is going on? And we were trying our best, but now we're very much aligned with the organization's direction and our annual business priorities, and how we communicate and what we're able to say no to, quite frankly, so that we can focus on the right things is critical. And you really get joy, at least I do, because you know what the results can be, and we start hearing employees and other people go, oh, now I get it. Oh, I see this organization differently. Now I understand things from a different viewpoint. It wakes up everybody, and then you get momentum behind it, and people want more of the right things because you have a line versus somebody just wants random communication about whatever. But it is a lot of work if it doesn't already exist.
Yeah, I remember the days when people would call the communications department and say, I need a brochure.
Oh, gosh.
And I need a by Tuesday. Yeah.
It's really quite funny. It's really interesting because I talk about, both Wayne and I talk about this. Alignment is not an end state. It's a journey that you go on, just where, because you can become out of whack at any point in time. I remember speaking with a CEO about alignment at a conference, and he said, Zora, the way I look at it as a CEO, when new people come into the business, I spend time with them and I explain what we're here to do, what we're about, what are our values, what we expect of each other, all that sort of stuff, why we do what we do. So, aligning to purpose, to vision and values, culture, our promise, all that sort of stuff, which is core. And he said, so, I draw a circle on the whiteboard. This is pre-COVID. I draw a circle on the whiteboard. You could do it on a mirror, I suppose, these days. And he said, so I've got this big wheel. So I use a wheel as an analogy. And within that, we have all these different parts of the business, lots of business units doing their thing, and all aligned, supposed to be going in the same sort of direction, rolling on. And he said, if one of those components gets out of whack, that circle is no longer a circle. It's got a bump in it. So my role is to smooth that bump out. So what my job is to make sure that we're aligned. And I can't do that without the comms people. Mm-hmm. And he said, so as a CEO, that's my core focus. If we're not aligned as a business, if we're not aligned as an organization, if we're not heading in the right direction and everyone understands, if we don't have that shared understanding and clarity, and if it doesn't mean things to people and they don't know what their role is, we're just never going to get there. So there's no point in trying to be high performing if you're not delivering on the promise that you're putting out there to your employees, to your customers, to your investors, to the community at large, because then you're going to have that organizational integrity gap. And that becomes problematic in so many ways. You can recognize misalignment, if you've got senior leaders who don't all understand what the priorities are, if your executives aren't all on the same page, as in the C-suite. And that's normally where it starts. You have to start with understanding what the misalignment gaps are and then having those genuine conversations about how you're going to address those and commit to doing it. I had a conversation the other day with some C-suite folk with a client that I'm working with. And, I'm helping them in their work to build the capability of strategic alignment and comms within leaders. And I was asked a question, do you think that this is going to achieve the outcome? And I said, just doing the capability program? No, absolutely not. And then so, they said, what do we need to do? And I said, well, if you don't put this in the KPIs, if you don't put alignment and communication in the KPIs of leaders all the way down, it's just not going to become embedded. You have to, put in place the rituals. You have to make it natural. You have to change the mindset of people so they know what they're doing. It can't be just we know what we're doing and comms is a task. Everyone's responsible for comms. But you listen to the communication professionals for the best strategic advice and when to say yes or no.
Yeah, and alignment also needs to apply to processes as well, where
absolutely.
Misalignment between a process and the messages, even if all of the executives are sending that message appropriately in their meetings and their one-on-ones. If the processes don't align, that's equally problematic.
There's a brilliant piece of work that's been done by a guy called Jonathan Trevor. And Jonathan Trevor runs a program at Oxford that I did a couple of years ago, which is on enterprise-wide alignment, so strategic alignment. And it's about looking at alignment in an organization or the enterprise as a value chain. So, you have your purpose, and the purpose is something clearly that is integral to any organization, irrespective of whether it's a for-profit or for, not-for-profit or government organization, whatever type of organization it is, that it should stay the same. The way you articulate it could potentially change. So that is something that you'll probably never really achieve, but it's that, you're guiding North Star. Your strategy that you create, is what you want to win at, and it has to be the strategy that it's trying to deliver to that purpose. And then you have your organizational capabilities. So do you have the right skills, the right people, in place to be able to deliver on the strategy? The architecture is all about the structures. And then you've got those management processes and systems. So if those processes and systems, so say your IT or the design of your workplace, or the people and culture side, all of these sorts of things, if those things are out of whack, if they're not going to enable you to be able to deliver on your strategy, and you'll never get there. So you do have to have the right systems and processes in place to be able to do it.
Robin and Sue, I knew about Zora's work in alignment because I participated in some of the research. I wasn't privy to the nominations that were made for you. So I get to learn with everybody who's watching what your contributions to the profession were, at least insofar as the fellows nomination. Sue, what was in your nomination?
So I've had the privilege of doing quite a bit of teaching and mentoring over the years, and developing curriculum and that kind of thing. But I think the thing that stood out for me the most, and I know that there's a mix of stuff you've done for the profession and stuff you've done for Iebc, but truly for me the thing I'm most proud of was my work in the early days of the inception of the Global Communication Certification Council and the GCCC and certification. I was at the time this whole thing got brought forward, the director of accreditation exams. I was on the accreditation committee, in fact. And I in those days, I like to call it the director of failed exams, because as you will recall, a lot of people failed the accreditation exam the first time, 65% of candidates. And my job was not only to regrade the failed exams to make sure that they were graded accurately, but then also to contact the candidates and talk them through the things they needed to work on. As a result, I was spending 80, 90 hours a month trying to keep up with the volume here. And it's one of the reasons in my mind that the accreditation program itself, because the questions were all open-ended and there's so many components to it, was really difficult for the organization to sustain. And marking it was honestly quite subjective. And then fast forward to certification, I was involved in the very early stages when that came about, after IEB took the decision to change the program to seek ISO accreditation for the program. I was a part of the very first conversation about what does this look like. And I think that some things that really resonated for me were alignment with the global standard, and something that everybody could benchmark themselves against in terms of where are you in your career, where are you going in your career, and then you could figure out among the various levels in the career roadmap where you were, and then what certification you were going to pursue. So that in many ways was a contribution to the broader communication world, because you don't have to be a member to be certified. That is an ISO requirement. And so it is open to anybody who's in the communication profession. But to help them get there, with the career roadmap, the global standard, and then linking all these things together has just been really amazing to watch. Certainly don't take credit for any of that, except that I was just there at the beginning, and really happy to see where it's come so far.
I remember being in a meeting at an international conference to first talk about certification, and there was a consultant there explaining the difference between accreditation and certification. Yes. And boy, accreditation is an organization gets accredited, not people. It was a fascinating conversation, and it was a privilege to be part of it. Robin, before we move to you, I'd like to again open the floor to a little discussion around certification. Any observations or thoughts on that?
Oh gosh, being in the first SCMP exam, and I was an advocate too, and I was chairman of the International Executive Board when we sunsetted ABC or accreditation, so we could begin to move forward further on launching the initial exam and then the second exam. But I remember a couple of things. I remember being in the first exam at one of the international conferences. So I guess it was 2017. And I remember walking in the room and seeing a few people I knew, and I'm like, oh, please let me pass this exam, because I've been an advocate, and it's like, we all know who's taking the test, right? So it was really exciting to get the first certificate. But, hearing the news that not only the first exam, but the second one had achieved the accreditation we were going for with ISO. And it was just over the moon, because I know how many dozens and dozens of people had worked toward that over a very long time period. I was just like, we did it. And sometimes I have conversations with other comms professionals, and they're like, why is this a thing? And I'm like, it's a thing because our profession has matured just like any other profession. Why wouldn't we have this? And they always pause and go, huh, yeah, right. It's like what we were talking about earlier about strategy, alignment, all those things. It's like communication is so integral to everything that people do in an organization. You can't not communicate. And we see, the internet is littered with examples of people who have not done it well. So I think, seeing us hit that, it was just such a great feeling of satisfaction. I was so proud of everybody who helped make that happen, because it has been a long journey.
I mean, I know it was controversial when we did, put a pin in ABCs. I'm an ABC, obviously. But what I tried to explain to people at the time, it's like your university offers an MBA, and then all of a sudden it stops offering it. It doesn't mean your MBA is no longer valid. So we do recognize and honor all of the ABCs who have been part of the legacy of Iebc. This really means, as you've said, Robin, a step forward for us as a profession, and recognizing that our influence goes beyond Iebc to the broader communication profession. And by opening up certification that way, by saying this is the global standard, these are the things you should know how to do, the milestones you should meet along the way, I think that really does give a whole different element to certification, and it was nifty for sure. I was the second chair of the GCCC back in the day, Robin. And I remember when we launched the first CMP exam, there was big doings.
I was on the GCCC in, I think I was on the Ieb, and I remember that first series of SCMP exams that had been done, and I spoke to a number of people who had just done the exam, and they said, look, that was hard. And I thought, oh, okay. I'm on the GCCC, I'm on the Ieb, I suppose I should go and do it myself. And I have already got certifications as a company director and also as a marketer. And so I've got letters and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, I just don't, do I need more post-nominals or not? No, I thought, no, I have to do it. I can't be advocating if I don't actually do it myself. So I was incredibly nervous because it is an exam that you can't study for, not really. And you just, it tests you and tests your knowledge and it tests your judgment. And I was so happy to actually pass that, and incredibly proud because it was the first time the exam was held in Melbourne in Australia, and it was during the Asia Pacific conference, and I put my hand up publicly. I'm sitting the exam, who's going to join me? And then I thought, oh, what if I fail? That's embarrassing. And yeah, so I put it out there publicly, so I completely get it. And I was really happy that I didn't fail.
Well, you know what I remember doing? I was on the plane on the way to, I can't remember what conference was that year, knew I was going to take the exam the next day. And I remember going through, the areas we're going to be tested on. And I was like, oh, I don't work in those areas. There were a couple of areas and I'm like, And I remember I had Wi-Fi on the plane, and I am literally like, to be honest, and I give people this advice. I'm like, this will actually make you feel better about things. Go Google, reputation management. Go Google whatever and look for the reputable. I'm serious. You Google the reputable sources, not because it's a cheat. What it does is when you start reading about these are best practices in reputation management, these are best practices in ethics and compliance, and then you go, oh, right. For me, it was like, oh, I know this stuff. It's like I just don't practice it every day in what I do currently.
Yeah.
I felt much more confident than going into that exam. I knew I wasn't going to get every question right. But I always tell people, since you can't really study for it, if there's an area you're concerned about, go do some research and you'll realize how much you actually do know.
Yeah. Robin, I do want to offer you the opportunity to talk about your contribution to the profession.
Sure. Mine has been, I think, very personal. And you were talking about things, beyond Iebc. But I have to say, one of the things I hear all the time from people who've been on the Fellows Committee and just people who know me, they're like, how many roles have you had in Iebc? And I was the most reluctant Iebc member. When I joined 30 years ago this year, I had a boss who was president of the Fort Worth, Texas chapter. And she's like, you're coming with me. We have a meeting. It's in the Petroleum Club on the upper part of our building. I'm like, no, I'm not. It was literally my first day on the job. And I was like, no, I'm introverted. I'm not a joiner. It's not my thing. I just like, I'm getting married this year. I got a lot going on. And she's like, oh, we already paid for your membership. You're coming. Okay. And then she tricked me. I was like, I'm not really sold on Iebc. She took I was a staff writer at the time. She took one of the stories I had written for one of our print publications at the time, and she submitted it for me in bronze quill, and I won. And I didn't even know. And so I got because everything was old school then, I get a letter in the mail saying, congratulations. And I'm like, what? I thought there was a mistake. I'm like, oh, this is how she sucks me in. Right. So then within 2 years, I was president of the chapter, because it was a small chapter and they needed help. And quite frankly, I don't think I was very good at it. But over the course of the last 3 decades, people have been like, oh, you should do, which is how Iebc is. And I'd be like, no, I'm done. No. And it just kept going. And then before you know it, it's like, I think I've done pretty much every role you could do at every level of the organization. So it's been a joy and a great journey, because I have so many friends globally as a result of that. But along the way, I didn't think about, you're getting older and you're gaining experience and life just happens. And I remember about 17 years ago, someone in another state in the United States called me and said, hey, and I knew this person. And she said, hey, I'd like you to be my mentor. Somebody, was suggesting that I could use a mentor. And they said, you'd be ideal, and, list all this stuff. And I'm like, what? I was like, I'm not old enough to be a mentor. Like, what? And then I went, oh, wait. This is what happens. And it was a joy. So I mentored her for a couple of years, and then it sort of snowballed. And so through the opportunities, not only through Iebc, but speaking, I do a lot of public speaking on strategic communication, personal branding, some other topics that are particularly strong for me. And I do those in a lot of organizations, and almost inevitably I end up meeting a couple of people and I end up mentoring them. And that's been such a joy, not only through that process, but through, I manage a large team. And that was another area I was reluctant about. I said, I don't want to be a people manager. Oh my God, managing sucks, right? I'm pretty good at it. And one of the things I've done through my roles is take people who have been stuck for whatever reason and say, God, this person has management potential. What do I have to do to get them there? And so part of it is here's, reinforcing that and giving them confidence, and then helping them on the areas where they're weak and say, okay, I'm going to help you overcome all these things until you are positioned for a promotion opportunity. And I've done that very recently with one of my team members. So that's one. The other thing that's come out of it is when you have the opportunity to speak often at events, I find there are a lot of communication professionals, like we were discussing earlier, where maybe they're not really familiar with the concept of alignment, or they haven't been exposed to the things that they need to be exposed to in order to become really strategic advisors and maybe eventually business leaders. I have inadvertently found a niche for those people who don't have that. Organizations that have no resources, that don't have a budget, that don't have, and I've been fortunate to have those things, but I work with them. And again, part of it is a cheerleader role, but the other part is one-on-one working with them and saying, this is how you do this. And this is how you make an impact. And I'm going to teach you how to measure. And I'm going to teach you how to build this comms. I'm going to teach you how to become an advisor and do all the things. And the joy of seeing that somebody transpire as a result of that gives me so much satisfaction. And then seeing them flourish and do the same for other people. So it's sort of like people did that for me and paying that forward. And I'll give you one example of that. This was when I was no longer on the board, but I had been invited to come to to visit the Africa region. And the conference that year was in Cape Town. And I did a workshop there on same thing, strategic communication planning, especially if you have no resources. How do you make this happen? And the audience was a bit more reserved. There were people from South Africa, Botswana, Tanzania, a couple of other countries, and they were very polite, but really, I'm used to people interacting with me, and they were pretty quiet. But I kept re-emphasizing, like, here's how you do this. Here's what, yada, yada, yada. When it was over, I said, if you need help, you need mentoring, you need, anything, just whatever it is, here's how you connect with me. Here's how you contact me online. And I had a few people do that afterward, and a few people talked to me afterward. But a few weeks later, a young lady contacted me from Angola, and she had just graduated from the University of Cape Town. And she's like, will you mentor me? I'm in a company where I have nothing. I am the only communications person, and I just graduated, and I don't know what to do. And that was such a gratifying relationship. She would be in an internet cafe in Angola, and we would handle the time difference, and I would spend, maybe an hour to 90 minutes with her periodically, teaching her how to go through this and how to work with her boss to get the boss to begin to trust her as a strategic advisor. And it was so gratifying because she did the things, and then she got promoted, and then she went on to a better job. She started working her way through a career. So I feel like, there are a lot of different ways that you can make a difference. And sometimes it starts with one person. And for me, it's been those connections over time that I have watched them grow and pay it forward. And I feel, if my career ended today, I would feel really good about the ways that I have helped people move forward in their careers.
Yeah, I have done.
Sorry, just so funny. My Iabc experience is exactly the same. My boss at the time was the Edmonton chapter president, and she said, come with me, we're going to a meeting. So I just wanted to share that. And 40 years later.
Yep, exactly.
My first corporate communications job was with ARCO. My first boss was Dave Orman, who is a fellow. And he said, if you work for me, you will be a member of this organization. It was not Iabc Los Angeles at the time. It was Southern California Business Communicators, SCBC. And I said, okay, who pays for that? He said, ARCO does. I said, well, in that case, I don't care.
That was it. It was like, it's free. Okay, fine.
Yeah. And I've done my share of mentoring with people who reported to me, but I am now part of a program through Iabc San Francisco where I've been paired with somebody, and it is very gratifying. Robin, you were chair of the International Executive Board, and I know everybody here has had roles in Iabc leadership, but can you talk for a minute or two about what membership in Iabc has meant to you in your career personally? Any dimension you want to tackle for that? Zora, let's start with you.
Oh, for me, it was one of the best decisions I made professionally. And I had walked out of a secure job in a advertising agency. I was in the management team as a strategy director, and I just didn't have a job to go to. And I thought, well, in actual fact, it's got to be a way that I can connect with people and expand my network. And I went to an Iabc function, which was like a speed networking event, and walked in there and I felt really welcome. And I have been involved in lots of other organisations, and that was one where I didn't feel that clickiness. And I thought, this is interesting. So I joined up, and I joined lots of organisations that year. So, you know, I was a member of all sorts of different organisations, just getting myself out there. And this was the one that stuck. I joined the board within that year as vice president. And, you know, that was the start of that journey. And I have found this incredible network, which is what I call the Brains Trust. And that's, you know, the three of you are definitely in that group of people who I can connect with, who I can tap into, who I can learn from, that you just can't do through LinkedIn or Twitter or other associations. They're just not as giving as the Iabc members. And the fact that you can just tap into them anywhere in the world is incredible. It's really valuable, even if you are, you know, very much focused on your local environment, the city that you happen to live in. Getting access to better practices, not necessarily best practice, because I always think we can be better, better practices from other parts of the world, from other sectors, from other disciplines, I think is really important and makes you better at what you do. So for me, Iebc has been a way that has expanded my development as a professional, has broadened my thinking. It's also given me the opportunity to sharpen my leadership skills at, you know, all the various levels. And I'm really appreciative. And the fact, Robin, when you were talking about the impact you've made with people within the profession, that made me smile, because that's one of those things that I really love. And every so often you do get a message from someone who says, because of you, I've done X or something like that. And that's just amazing that you can have an impact on someone's life and their decisions and their career, sometimes without even realizing it. When you get a note from someone, you've been my mentor, and I'm like, really? I didn't know about that, but okay, that's fine. Or sometimes it's you do take on that mentor role in an official capacity, and I just love seeing how people progress. I like seeing how people grow. It's wonderful to see.
Sue, what has IEBC membership and involvement meant for you?
Well, it's interesting because back in the day, so go to the Wayback Machine, before computers. I started out with a typewriter, as most folks around the table did. We used to get Communication World as a print magazine, and it used to come delivered to work. And for many years in a row, it seemed to me that every month when I got my Communication World magazine, there was at least one article in there about something I was dealing with at that moment. In fact, it kind of was a little spooky at times, because I thought, who's watching me? What's happening here? Because I'm struggling with this very problem, and here is information that comes to me through my Communication World magazine. And I think that there's so many facets of IEBC that have really made a huge difference in my life. So first of all, the continuous learning. I think that when you're not in a major center, world center, your learning opportunities might be limited. And certainly, again, you have to think pre-internet. You could only study the things that were, within hailing distance. So it was a way to connect to a profession that really wasn't well established where I was. It connected me to the best and brightest in the world, and still does this day. And I think that I love the relationships I've built. And I very early on reached out to people And I thought, oh man, I don't know what they're going to think about this, but I'm going to call and ask for some advice. And I would call up people, IABC members around the world, and say, hey, I'm dealing with this issue. Here's the situation. This is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And to a person, generous with their advice, their thoughts, their wisdom around things that they've tried before. And never once was I made to feel like, why don't you know this, right? There was this generosity around, let's all help each other excel. And IABC's just been huge for me. And anybody who knows me knows I could talk about it all day.
You mentioned Communication World. I also remember the old World Book, the directory.
Yes.
And I had the same experience you did, Sue, where I would call people for advice, recommendations, their wisdom. And there were a few times I would have somebody say, I really don't have the time and I don't know you. And I would say, well, okay, I got your name out of the IABC World Book. And they would suddenly perk up and, oh, you're IABC? Well, in that case, let me stop what I'm doing and help you out. It is just part of the unique culture of IABC. Robin, I know that your involvement has certainly been extensive. At one time I felt I knew you best through your leadership role in IABC, but now I follow you on Instagram, so I know you from a whole different set of.
Yeah, I left Facebook. I got tired of all the things, but I'm still under their spell since I'm on Instagram. So,
but IABC, what has it meant for you personally?
Well, so everything that Zora and Sue said, I agree with 1000%. Same experiences. In addition, nobody believes me when I say I'm an introvert, but I really am. And probably over time, because of IABC and because of some other things I've been involved with, I'm an ambivert. So I have no problem getting up on a stage in front of 2,000 people and I can speak, off the cuff. But when I'm done, I'm like, let me go back to my hotel room now. I'm shy. And I will say that IEBC, a couple of things. That first conference was in Chicago because I remember it well. And I remember being in awe of all the things I was hearing and all the people I was meeting. And I still do. I'd only lived in Texas. I hadn't been around a lot then. And I don't know what I thought it was going to be, but I didn't see the kind of path that IEBC opened for me merely by being exposed to these amazing people who were pioneers in our profession. And it started changing how I looked at what was possible for me. And then beyond that, even reluctantly taking these leadership roles, a step up and a step up and a step up, I got so much valuable experience, especially when you're dealing with the hard stuff. So just when now I look back and go, well, that seems pretty simple. If you're firing a volunteer who's not working out on the board, right? That's hard, but then you get better at it. When I think about other leadership roles, where like on the International Executive Board, when I was chairman, we're going through massive change and it was painful. But having to deal with some challenging situations and relying on the expertise of the board and the staff and our other volunteers, and then, having to handle some things myself, whereas like I need to have a tough one-on-one conversation with somebody. What I learned from that made me so much tougher. And I think it's not even that. I think I was always tough and I was always strong, but it reminded me of that. It's like, you're stronger than you think you are. You are smarter than you give yourself credit for. You can handle just about anything. And I will tell you that all those experiences now, when I'm having a tough day at work, I'm like, people come in and they're like, oh my God, hair on fire. And I'm like, okay, let's just break this down. What's the most important thing we have to do first? What's the most important thing strategically? Or maybe it's not strategic. We need to take action right now. What's the tactic we have to do right now? And I'm much better at prioritizing those things. And I've had many team members say like, how do you do that? And I'm like, how do I do what? Like, they're like, well, you don't freak out. And I'm like, well, I'm freaking out on the inside. But I'm like, okay, what, I'm like, who do we have to make my boss happy? Are we making the CEO? Who do we have to address first? Who's the audience, or what thing has to get fixed first? And we do it in priority order. And I'm much better at doing that. And really that is a result of all the leadership opportunities I've had in IEBC. I would not be the same person had it. And I absolutely believe that would not have been the same without it.
That's really an excellent point, Robin. I completely agree.
We have about 10 minutes left. I have two questions I would like to try to get through, but I also want to invite those watching live to share their questions or comments. We've had one observation from Chip Griffin, who's excited to see an evening edition of Circle of Fellows. But if anybody has a question for any of the new fellows on the broadcast, please feel free to enter those in the YouTube chat function. Because of the depth of experience that you bring to the table, I'm wondering if you can talk for a minute about what you see as the future of the profession. We have certainly gone through a transformation, particularly in internal communications with the pandemic. There's a general sense that our stock has risen with leadership as everybody got sent home and suddenly leaders were faced with the challenge of leading organizations that were dispersed and remote. But where do you think we're headed? And Robin, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Gosh, that's a tough one. And you actually, I think the good news is I think we're open to more amazing possibilities because of what we just went through. And I was gonna say what you just said, which is I'm in that camp of believing like our stock is really high right now. I think the challenge right now is to capitalize on that and not let it slip. And I don't think we will. I mean, I think, you're talking about individuals and what they do, but I think as a profession, whether we were expecting a pandemic or not, we took a leap forward. I think, this is where I might sound old school. I don't know. But I think all the things that we just bragged about what we think is really valuable in Iebc, that never changes. And Shel, because you talk a lot about technology and I know the conversation you're going to have at World Conference about, the metaverse. And I think it's what we do with that without losing the humanness. Because for me, there is no substitute. It might be like this. It might be on a phone call. There's no substitute for human interaction. AI is an amazing thing, and I'm fooled by AI sometimes. Sometimes it seems really human to me, but I still think there's no substitute for the human connection. It's part of who we are. It's how we're built. And I think as communicators, making sure that we harness all these things that are available to us and they come online faster and faster, that we're not losing the thing that made all of us good at what we do. And that's that human, that's your heart and soul. And I think that's the biggest challenge is like, we don't lose ourselves in that, because you can see, like what goes on in social media, and people can be really ugly and people can be almost dehumanizing, or no, they are dehumanizing. There's some really, like Twitter itself. I love Twitter, but it can be a dumpster fire. And I think part of our role is to make sure that we're keeping the humanity together in our organizations, or if we're communicating on behalf of a government or a community entity, it's real important to keep that heart and soul in everything that we do. And I think that's part of our charge.
Okay. Zora, what about you? Where do you think we're headed?
I think that we need to be much more attuned to recognizing and understanding trends and realizing how we can adapt and what we can use for the businesses or the organizations that we work for to find the value in that. I still think we're behind the 8 ball in being strong on business acumen as well as digital acumen. So those two areas, business acumen is something that you would think is core to every communication professional, but I still see major gaps in that, because the conversations around how do we prove our value, how do we get a seat at the table, all those things still keep happening despite the fact that we've risen in terms of our importance through the pandemic. What was obvious to us became more obvious to others in the organization, and I'm afraid that we could drop the ball on that, and that we, as we're moving through into whatever the new normal is. So I really think that we need to work on that. So the digital acumen piece definitely needs to be stronger, not just skills, but much more broader. And the work that you're doing and talking about with regards to metaverse, I think it's critical to that. So I would look at all those sorts of things and thinking about how do we weave in how do we work more collaboratively together with people who are in behavioural science and those in the engagement space, as in public engagement. So I think when we combine forces with other professions, we're much stronger in what we do.
And Sue, your view?
For me, I think there's really going to be greater integration of aligned skill sets. So marketing, corporate communication, internal communication. I think there's going to be greater integration of those, and they're not going to operate in silos so much within an organization anymore, because we will have understood better that our audiences are intertwined. Our employees are also our customers. Our customers are also our neighbors, or they're our stakeholders. And so I think that you can't have these silos of operation anymore. I think that it's going to need to be more integrated so that we can capitalize on the things that each of those disciplines does well, and learn from each other, and just amplify that out to our audiences. The other thing I just want to say real quickly is I think that the pandemic has been the most unbelievable social experiment you could ever have. And if nothing else, has really underscored for everyone that we are social beings and we need to be around other people. And so the people skills part, Robin, I think you're spot on. I think that that is going to continue to be an area where we can lead the way in helping people to better relate to one another.
With just a couple minutes left, I'm going to ask you each for your one best piece of advice to somebody just starting in this profession about what they should do, how they should approach it, whatever your one piece of advice is. And Sue, let me start with you on this one.
Join IABC.
Excellent. I like that.
Truly, there's nothing you can't learn. There's no skill you can't gain. There's no network that you can't join that is better than IABC.
Robin, I'm sure you would echo that, but in addition to that, what other advice would you offer?
So I know that not everybody on the planet has seen the show Ted Lasso, but I am a fan. And it was
Yes.
the show we needed during the pandemic. And there is a particular episode where he's playing darts. And I won't, for people who haven't seen the show, I won't tell you. But one of the things he says in there, and I forget who it's attributed to, it was somebody who actually said the quote, but it was, be curious, not judgmental. So if you're coming into the profession, it's like, don't assume you know it all because you are more digitally savvy or you have whatever. It's like, be curious, learn from other people, whether it's through IABC, learn from your mentors, learn from your boss, learn from your peers. Don't judge that something that may be done in an old school way is not valuable because maybe it's still the right thing to do for that audience, right? So be curious, not judgmental.
And Zora?
It's interesting, Robin. You sort of stole my thunder. I was going to say be a sponge. So make sure that you are curious. The other thing I would say is be comfortable being uncomfortable. So you need to put your hand up for opportunities, create opportunities, or put your hand up for opportunities as they arise, even if you've never done it before, because that's the way you're going to learn more.
Great. And Zora, I want to give you 30 seconds. I know you are the chair of the conference.
Oh, yes.
The conference coming up imminently. There's still time for people to register, isn't there?
There is. They can go to wc.iabc.com and register. It's going to be an incredible experience. We've reimagined it. It's the first time for 3 years that we're all coming together in New York City, 26 to 29 June. So jump on board, register. There's pre-conference masterclasses on the Sunday. We're doing an incredible gift of communication idea exchange, which is to support the Media Development Foundation in Ukraine. We're raising funds through Iabc Foundation because that's what they need. So this is a group of, well, it's the journalists in Ukraine who are trying to battle disinformation and misinformation, and they need the funds to buy the bulletproof vests and the other things that they need just to do their job. So we're supporting them. And I'm really proud, and thank you all for supporting us in making it happen.
I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to being there in person and seeing everybody face to face. I do want to let everyone know before we wrap up that the next Circle of Fellows on July 21st at our usual time, which is 1 p.m. Eastern Time, will focus on what communications is and isn't. Looking forward to having that conversation because I'm frequently telling people that's not communication, that's just messaging. So I'm anxious to hear what our panelists have to say about that. And our panelists include Neil Griffiths, Ned Lundquist, Martha Muzichka, and Jennifer Waugh. So it should be a great international panel, just as this one was. I want to thank you all for your time, especially with all of the time zone challenges, especially the one that I faced because I showed up late thinking I was at a different time. And thank you for putting up with that too. So until next month, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.